Okay, so here's a pen from Goulet Pen Company. Well, wait a minute. No, it's not. Haha, fooled you. Yeah, this is a box of vintage pens from my good friend John Summers, who has sent me a number of vintage pens in the past to repair. Let's open it up and see. There's a note. Burgundy Waterman's W2-B, repair as needed. Granny's pen for granddaughter. And this would be the Burgundy Waterman's Granny's pen for granddaughter. It's a lever filler, and it has a tiny Waterman nib, 14 karat gold, and it looks in pretty good shape. Interesting split ebonite feed. So we're going to triage this pen. This is a Waterman W2-B, and I believe it's from around the 1950s. We look at it, it's a medium-sized pen. Let's compare it with something else. What do we have here? Here's a Pilot Metropolitan. Right next to it, you can see it's shorter, but about the same thickness as a Metro. And of course, it posts, and they're about the same size. The Waterman being slightly smaller than the Metro posted. It is a celluloid fountain pen in a lovely burgundy color, wine-colored burgundy, with the Deco Waterman's clip. It says Waterman's down vertically, and it's got that lovely Deco style. This one's in good shape because it's not falling apart. That's a rivet right there. So you need special tools if you're going to fix one of those. It's a single gold cap band. The imprint says Waterman's made in England W2. Round end finial. There is some damage on here. I don't know whether that can get out or not. That feels like it's on the surface right there. Spade lever filler, and we got some staining right here as well. That one looks like it's in to the surface. I'm not sure about that, but it'll need some polishing. Let's unscrew the cap, and we see the same colored sections. Some of these had black sections. Has a small flare. And let's focus in on that gold nib. And the gold nib says Waterman's 14 CT W-2B. To be or not to be, that's the question. And it has an ebonite split feed. Some of these had fins, some of these didn't. This one looks like it's from the early to mid 1950s. And the section is not glued on. I think it might have been shellacked on one time, but it actually unscrews. You can see that there's some spiral marks on the end of that section there that helps it screw into that barrel. And there's the remnants of that sack. It's a desiccated sack right there on the end of that section, so we got to get that off, and then we can knock out the feed and the nib and get that nib polished up. Let's take a look at the condition of the nib tip. It looks like a manifold nib, and those were nibs that were designed to write through many copies of paper, carbon paper, hence manifold. It might be slightly misaligned, but it looks to be in pretty good shape. I don't expect this to have much flex to it, but manifold nibs don't tend to have much flex, but this bounces a little bit on my thumbnail. So it'll be interesting to see how that nib writes. Now, the sack in there is all desiccated and old, and you can hear it crunch, 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 like that. And I'm just going to get out a tissue here so I don't make a mess all over everything, because these bits are going to fall out. And I exercise that desiccated sack against the pressure bar. And we can see that the pressure bar is working pretty nicely. These ones, the lever is actually attached to the pressure bar on a little sliding mechanism. Maybe you can see it down in there. But I'll have to get all the excess old desiccated sack out of there and brush clean carefully so I don't dislodge the lever from the pressure bar. But the pressure bar looks to be in good shape. I'm actually going to use my tool I got from the Inky Nib, which is this camera, and I'll go in here and inspect the inside of that barrel and show you the video. So now we have it in pieces. I've got to clean it up, get that excess sack off of that section, I'll do that with an X-Acto blade and sort of chip it away because it's like glass when it's desiccated like that. Then I'll get my test tube brushes and clean out the inside of that barrel, and then we can get after resacking it. Here's a number 17 sack, latex sack, that should fit this pen. We'll trim that off and get that working. But once we've cleaned up this section, I want to knock that ebonite feed out of there and get at that nib. That's what we'll do next. There, now I'm going to soak this for a bit in my ultrasonic bath of pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia. And that should loosen up all that old ink that's in there, and then we can knock that feed out a little bit easier. There we go, fresh out of the bath. Actually cleaned up that gold very nicely too. And so you can see the section is all nice and clean. Nozzle on the end of the section is clean, and that ebonite feed is sticking out from the end. So it should be fairly easy to tap down. So I've got my Bill's block right here, my Bill's knockout block, and we put it in the hole where the nib can go through but the section doesn't. And I'm just going to tap it without the bar because I can use one of these tapping bars to tap down, but because it's exposed, I think I'm just going to tap it a little bit right there. There we go. We tap that down so that it's flush with the section, and then I can use this rod to tap on it some more. I'll have to do this off camera because I haven't got enough height. I was worried that that rod might not go through, but it's perfect. It actually fits through that section. It's a long feed. See? Still hammering at it. There. It dropped through. And left the nib right there. And there's the nib. Looks very nice. We'll polish it up with my jewelry polishing cloth, and we'll see how it comes up. Look at the feed. It has a nice wide channel on it. Ebonite. I'll polish that up as well. So this part that's showing shines up really nice. Ebonite can polish up very, very shiny. And we'll put this section back in the bath again to get all the extraneous ink out of it. There, that's after about a couple of minutes with the polishing cloth. It's looking very, very nice, inside and out. The beauty of gold. After 60, 70 years, let's see, 1950, say this is 1952. So that would make this nib 72 years old. So after 72 years, it comes up like it's brand new. Okay, I'm back after polishing up the cap and the barrel. I used 400 grit flexible sandpaper to get out the big gouges. There weren't that many, so I just worked a few of the scratches that were in the cap and the barrel. And then I went after it with my micro mesh pads, going from 1500 grit right up to 12,000 grit. And then I vigorously polished it with my Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Swirl Remover number 2, which is a polishing compound. And as you can see, it's come up very nicely indeed. Now, this was never going to look brand new. The plating is almost all gone off of that clip. It was like that when I got it. I polished it some more just to get the rough edges off and make it look a little bit shinier. But it's gone from a gold color to a very light gold to that chrome color. You can see some of the gold. Certainly the gold plating on the top finial is good. The gold plating on the single cap ring is good. The barrel came up very, very nicely. It has that imprint still on there. I avoided sanding that, but I got all of the micro scratches and years of scratching out of that barrel. There are still a few very, very fine cap marks. I didn't want to go too deep. Again, this isn't going to be a brand new pen ever again. The section came up very, very nicely. The ebonite feed, I polished it up so it's nice and shiny, and of course the nib. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have to resack this pen But before I do that, I'm learning to put the first things first. I want to reinstall the nib and the feed into the section, and then put the section in the barrel and test right with the nib first before I put the sack on the pen. Then if I need to remove that nib and feed for any reason, I can pound it back out again without having to remove and destroy another sack. So I've sanded this down, this ebonite down a little bit more to make it fit through. So let me place the ebonite feed through. And if you remember, it was slightly proud of the end of that section, like about that. So it's going through very nicely. Of course, the nib isn't there, so it makes it that much easier. So we're going to place the nib. So the feed is right there at the very end, like that. Hold on to both of them, and I'm going to get some gripper material here, and then give it a nice push and see how far I can get it in. That's what she said.
That's what she said.
All right.
I put it in a little bit further than I expected.
Oh, that's not right.
Wonder if that's too deep. No, it actually looks pretty good. Maybe the nib needs to go in a little further. That nib might be just slightly proud of that. I want that feed to be right up there. So I might tap this out and try it again. I'll place the nib a little bit deeper. That looks almost perfect. And then we're going to put it back in the section without a sack. Just like that. Yeah. And then we're going to dip test it first with some Waterman's Serenity Blue. Just enough to wet the beak. Let's see. Let's call this a 1950 Waterman's W2-B. And this is very scratchy in that direction. It's okay that way. Okay that way. A little bit of line variation. Feed is not holding very much ink. So I call this a fine. It feels like a manifold nib. Get my loop out and check the tines. Yeah, they're slightly misaligned. They were slightly misaligned when I looked at it before. So I'm going to try to bend them back into shape just by pushing them up and down like that. Gold is very malleable, so you don't have to do it too much with gold. Yeah, so this is going to take a little bit of work to get those tines aligned properly. Well, now I've got it aligned, and I'm going to close up here for you. Maybe you can see this if I can get it in focus. But those tines are cut asymmetrically. That nib slit actually is cut asymmetrically. So the tines are slightly imbalanced. I've got them aligned really nicely, but now that it's aligned, I'm going to smooth it out a little bit. It's actually writing not too badly right now. I've still got some scratch that way, but I think because the nib is aligned now, I can polish that out. Okay, that's writing beautifully now. Still a lot of feedback, but it's nicely wet, and it writes with no, I ran out of ink, and it writes with no effort on the page. So now all we have to do is to put a sack in it. Put a sack in it, Doug.
Put a sack in it, Dave.
So I've taken the sack and I put it into the barrel as far as it will go. It sticks out just a tiny bit. And then we're going to take the amount of the section that goes inside. The sack needs to come to right there. So I'm going to take just the amount of those threads off of the sack. So that would be about that much. There we go. So that should get that into the barrel, almost to the bottom of the barrel, just like that. We get some talc and dredge our sack in some talc to make our sack slippery. There, one slippery sack, and then we'll test fit our sack on the section, get our sack spreader, make sure it goes over the nipple, and then it slides into the barrel, hopefully with no kinking. We don't need a kinky sack. And we get out our shellac pen from the Inky Nib, which is like a piston filler for shellac, has a brush at the end, and you just dial up a little bit of shellac at a time. Very, very neat. And we'll take our section, and because that feed protrudes from there, I don't want any shellac to get in that channel or on that feed at all. So we're going to be very, very careful. That's why this brush is such a godsend. Just lets you paint just the right amount. Spread our sack again, slip it under, give it a little bit of a twist. So now we let that dry overnight, and we'll be ready to test fill it tomorrow morning. So it's the next day, and that shellac is dried. I put the section back in the barrel again, and I've smoothed out that nib, so it's writing beautifully. Now all I have to do is fill it with some ink. So let's give that a try, and then we'll write with it. First thing we want to do, though, is I always forget about this. Get out my scale, and we weigh the barrel empty, 9.27. Press tear, bring in some ink, pull the lever, and let it go. And wait a couple of seconds. I'm going to pull the lever once more. Should hear bubbles, and I did. Wait a couple of seconds for it to inflate. Tissue, wipe off the excess, and we wait again. 1.21. Not too bad. 1.21 milliliters of ink. And get out some paper, and this, again, 1950 Waterman's W2-B. And it has a 14 karat gold. I never measured this nib to see. Oh, it's a 5. So this is a number 5 size. And I'm going to call it a fine nib. Let's check the wetness here. Well, it's really wet now. I worked on it quite a bit, and separating those tines and getting them balanced properly, a little bit more difficult than I expected, because the point is cut asymmetrically, so that slit is slightly off center. That happens a lot in vintage pens because they were all cut by hand. Yeah, this is a very, very pleasant writer now. So what do I think about this restoration? I've restored several Waterman lever fillers, which are some of the simplest fountain pens to repair. Knocking out the feeds, polishing the nibs, and replacing the ink sacs has always been fairly straightforward. The only issue I've had with these pens has been the riveted clip. When it gets loose, I'm just not equipped to replace or repair a rivet in a cap like that. These pens were not very expensive in the day, but they had lovely 14 karat gold nibs, and this one now writes beautifully, and it's polished up to its former glory. The cap and the barrel had some wear on them from 70 years of use, and had a couple of ink stains. With a little bit of micromesh and some polishing, this pen is back to its lovely condition. That this pen will be passed down from grandmother to granddaughter makes this restoration very special indeed. And there you have it. Thanks go out to John for providing this pen for restoration. Stay tuned for Pen Resurrection Sunday next week, as I believe I have a solution to restoring this Moore 94A with the broken lever. I'll give you a hint. It will only cost a dime. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say, thank you for watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.